Welcome. I'm so glad you're here. Today, we're going to talk about cultural adaptations for evidence-based practices in general, and also the ecological validity model, which has been used for a long time to make such cultural adaptations. So I'm going to share my screen. Okay, there we go. So evidence-based mental health treatments that were studied in developed countries with a narrow population now are expected to meet the needs of increasingly diverse populations, and we certainly see this in MST. In 2006, the American Psychological Association ended the debate about whether culture should be integrated into evidence-based practices. The APA asserted that families would achieve the best outcomes through the integration of services grounded in the best evidence, practitioner expertise, and the consideration of the experiences of the client. It is currently widely accepted that cultural adaptations are warranted when there are specific cultural contexts for risk and protective factors that influence referral behaviors. The need for cultural adaptation seems evident to us, but the complexities of maintaining fidelity through the adaptations complicates this process. The concerns regarding sustaining high adherence in order to achieve the best possible outcomes can result in the implementation of evidence-based models that end up being a poor fit for the real world. And I think all of you are aware of this because this is your job, right? You're constantly navigating real world pressures and needs with maintaining fidelity in the model to ensure that families get the best possible care. It's increasingly argued that the debate between maintaining adherence to a model and making adaptations is moot, and that in making adaptations is both unavoidable and pervasive as practices are disseminated. And I think the experts probably see this the most, that there's little tweaks and adaptations made that maybe sometimes don't even get reported, or it takes a while before they're reported. It's likely that this frequently happens without the developer or even the expert having any awareness. The actual issue should be how to assess for, monitor, and support adaptations, not whether or not there should be adaptations. Adaptations can be purposeful and useful changes to improve the fit between the model and the community. When adequately planned, it's possible to implement adaptations with fidelity. So we have this delicious looking cake on screen. In 2016, Kemp explained this process of adaptations as the plain cake with variations analogy. This is a way to conceptualize how fidelity and adaptations can successfully coexist. The core ingredient in the cake is flour, sugar, eggs, butter, vanilla, and milk. In an evidence-based program, these ingredients include the frequency and intensity of contacts and the actual interventions, such as family therapy, CBT, case management, substance abuse interventions, etc. The variations for the cake include adding cocoa powder to make a chocolate cake, coconut to make a coconut cake, or apples to make an apple cake. All these additional ingredients have a significant impact on the final product, but the fundamentals of the cake remain the same. Adaptations to a program may look like linking with medical practitioners to ensure that clients have medical care, and utilizing cultural treatment advisors when there's not a match between the clinician and the client. In 2017, Ahrens et al. Coined a term, scaling out, to describe when evidence-based practices are adapted either to new populations or delivery systems. To provide some context, scaling up refers to taking a model from the setting in which it was studied and implementing it in new settings. So, for example, a model that was tested in an academic setting with grant funding is being transported to a community mental health center with Medicaid funding. Scaling out is the intentional use of strategies to implement, assess, improve, and sustain evidence-based practices as they are delivered in situations that differ from those in the randomized controlled trials. Ahrens et al. Described a logical framework for determining what new evidence is needed for an intervention to retain its evidence-based standard when adaptations are made. Two types of scaling out are addressed: when the model is delivered in the target population but in a different delivery modality, and when the delivery modality is the same as the research but the population differs. The latter type is what we see most in our adaptations in MST. Scaled out interventions are generally divided into two kinds: surface level adaptations such as translations, references to cultural reference points, and then deep adaptations, which involve a more profound adjustment to cultural influence. Adaptations can happen in a top-down or a bottom-up format. Top-down adaptations happen really at the level of program development. When an intervention is developed for one group and is modified for another group. This can include additionally culturally specific training for staff or adjusting the practice format to align with community norms. Top-down interventions could be either surface level or deep. Bottom-up adaptations, which I think is mostly what we're concerned about and what the experts see on a week-to-week basis, occur when the staff implementing the model makes changes to implementation, either intentionally or without realizing it, to match a family's culture. This may look like bringing food to a session, holding shorter or longer sessions, or including extended family members in interventions related to the parenting role. In a meta-analysis in 2011, Benish et al. Found that adaptations that were culturally adapted on a deep level had better outcomes than those that were not. In 2021, Pera-Cardona et al. Described the adaptation process of an evidence-based parenting program in Chile. The adaptation process was multifaceted, starting with bilingual therapists who were trained in the original model, and then made session-by-session adaptations as they engaged in the initial delivery of the program. They kept notes on both surface level and deeper adaptations that were needed the first time they delivered the training. The bilingual staff were then interviewed one by one by the developers to assess the changes needed. For example, the concept of discipline was reframed as a learning experience for children rather than being presented as a punitive practice to eliminate negative behaviors. This was done to prevent caregivers from feeling ashamed of their current parenting practices. Additionally, the interventionists created metaphors to frame the new parenting practices being taught with a culturally relevant framework. Another example of both surface and deep level adaptations is the changes made to language, idioms, and slang specifically in the implementation of evidence-based parenting programs in Africa. Asimwe et al. In 2021 emphasized the importance of social justice issues when a model that was created in the developed world is transported to a developing context. As a result, adaptations addressing issues of culture, power, privilege, and access were addressed, and practitioners in the host country were in the lead of these developments. For research purposes, it is imperative that adaptations are closely documented in order to be reflected in the model. Now I want to talk about the ecological validity model, or EVM. Both these examples I just gave you use the ecological validity model to make adaptations. EVM is largely seen as the gold standard of cultural adaptations in the field. Resting on the hypothesis that cultural compatibility suggests that treatment is more effective when it matches and leverages the strengths of the client's cultural patterns, the literature supports both emic, that means within the culture, and etic, that means outside of the culture, perspectives on cultural adaptations. As such, the EVM, which is grounded in Bronfenbrenner's social ecological model of human development, recommends 8 elements to be attended to in making cultural adaptations. The first is language. So we want to ensure that the language is culturally syntonic. The second is persons. This addresses the role of ethnic racial match or mismatch in influencing the therapy relationship. Next comes metaphors, which is assessing symbols and concepts for cultural relevance. Fourth is content, ensuring that the provider has knowledge about the relevant cultural traditions, values, costumes, and uniqueness of groups. The fifth element is concept, ensuring that values around dependence, independence, and interdependence are culturally congruent, valuing the emic perspective over the etic perspective. The sixth element is that of goals, ensuring that the goals of treatment support adaptive values from the culture of origin. And the seventh element addresses the methods in that the treatment should utilize culturally appropriate treatment methods. The eighth and final element is that of context, taking into consideration the changing context during treatment, acculturative stress, the family's phase of migration, the family's developmental stage, and social supports and the relationship to the country of origin. Across numerous evidence-based practices reviewed in the literature, EBM has supported effective cultural adaptations. Thanks for joining me today.